How many times have you heard someone say, prevention is better than cure? I'm sure, like me, you would have heard someone say this, and I'm sure you would have agreed to this because it's always better to steer clear of a situation than find yourself in it and try to navigate and escape whilst you're in it, because the consequences can be rapid, right? And today I want us to take a detour and talk about this in a legal context. So what we're going to be doing in this channel, which we call the Legal Detour, is we're going to be talking to people or discussing real life issues, situations that people have found themselves in, and what the law says about those situations. What is it that they could have done also to prevent themselves, being in that type of situation, whether they're the ones personally who are affected by the lack of their decisions thereof, or else their families that they've left behind, right? And the purpose of us having these discussions and having these practical discussions about real life issues is so that we can help those who have not found themselves in these situations to take a step back, take the necessary actions, right? So that they do not, or their families do not find themselves in the same legal intricate situations that have turned their lives upside down. So, in case you're new or you've never seen me before, my name is Yolanda Miegeza. I'm an attorney by profession, right? And I practice at a law firm here in Johannesburg, South Africa. So today is the first session we're going to have here, so stay with me. We're going to be talking about one that will lead you to feel very frustrated. Hold on, as mentioned, we've got a story we're going to start with today. So the story is about three beautiful children who were left destitute because of the death of one parent. I want you to listen carefully to their story and the type of mistakes that were made and what it is that you can take advantage of or you can do to prevent this happening to your own children. So take it back a notch. Sometime in 2000, these three girls, minor children, are living happily in their family home with their mother and father. It so happened 2 years later, mom passes away, right? By the time mom passes away, there was something that they had picked up, in particular the older one who was 14, that dad was now in the bottle quite a lot, right? And so when mom passed away, they were left with dad alone. So because of the problem that dad had, things did not work out very well for the girls. The situation was a bit sticky staying with him. Not a problem. Family members, they stepped in and they tried to assist. Now, it so happened that one of the aunts who stepped in took the girls and stayed with him. Not a problem. Dad stayed at the house. It's not an issue. But, sometimes with families, because others also have big households, it's difficult to accommodate an addition of three children. So there were a lot of problems when the girls moved to live with the aunt. So they kept on moving from one family member to the other because of the situation of the dad. Now, the worst thing that actually happened here was that because of the state the father was in, he ended up selling the property that was left behind by him and his wife. Now, after he sold the property, you can imagine it was game over for the girls. They did not have a home. They did not have any form of hope that they could ever regain a place that they could call a home. So over the years, the girls have been living with different family members. Sometimes they have to be split up and go live somewhere else, etc., etc. Now the girls, I think, so they were now inquiring, saying that the situation is not really nice where they live, and they were wondering if they could challenge that sale, that was made by the dad years ago, because they believed that they were supposed to get something from that, right? Unfortunately, they've been around, they've been talking to people, and they've been told the same story, and that is, unfortunately, they can never recover the property. Why? It is because when the mother passed away, because of the value of the property and the estate that they had jointly, right? which is the mom and the dad of the girls, it wasn't a lot. So almost everything fell on or was inherited by their father. So when the dad sold the house, he actually had the right to do so because the girls were not going to get a share. Now, because of this, unfortunately, that situation cannot be changed. Before we even talk about what the mother could have done, let's talk about what the mother did not do that landed these children in this situation. There's so many things here, right? But I'm going to speak to two particular issues. One, that is the fact that they ended up moving around, no one who wanted to take over and be responsible for them. And two, the fact that they actually lost their only home that they actually still need to this day, that their mother and father worked for, but unfortunately because of the father's condition they lost it. Now, the reason why these girls found themselves in this situation, first and foremost, is because the mom did not have a will. She did not draft a will, at least giving those girls her 50%. She was married in community of property, right? And when you're married in community of property, you jointly own everything that you have. So she should have at least spoken about her own 50%, and she did not do that. And this is why the girls found themselves in this situation, because what ended up happening? What ended up happening is that the Interstate Succession Act had to kick in. And unfortunately, the girls ended up with nothing. Now, the other thing that the mom did not do was not appoint a guardian for these children. And this would be something that would be encapsulated in the will, making it clear that I know so and so could look after my children. Can they be considered as the guardian of these children? This is something that is helpful. Now, what happened? The children died. They ended up staying everywhere. They never had the stability they had when they were growing up, when the mother was around. So their lives was just turned upside down. So these are the two major things that the mom did not do, and as a result, these kids found themselves in this situation. Now, seeing what the situation is, what could have been done differently? What can you do differently so that this is never a possibility for your own children? This can never take place even after your death. Let's talk about it. So before we even say or talk about what this parent could have done differently, what you can do to prevent this, I think it's important to highlight here, because I know people will be like, why is the law the one deciding in this instance? Why in the first place is it distributing things in this manner? Here's something that we need to understand, is that we are given what we call freedom of testation. Meaning what? Meaning that you have got the right to dispose of the assets you have fully. You have got the right to determine who's going to inherit those things and how, in what percentage, right? You have got the right to put in conditions because these are the things that you owned. Biggest mistake that we make is that we do not leave these instructions. And so the law then has to step in. And then regulate the situation. It's unfortunate that when it does so, in some instances, it's not going to favor the very same people that you probably had in mind, that you would have wanted to favor, because it cannot work on that basis. It can only work on the basis of written down laws. We're not going to assess the feelings and the possibility of the mindset of the person. You should have had that written down. This is why the law then takes over and then regulates the situation. So to prevent this from happening, the first and foremost thing that should be at the back of your mind, that you should be gunning for, is having a will that is written, that has proper instructions. When you have a will that has proper instructions, you are giving clear indications as to how your things must be split, or who must get the things that you have labored for during your lifetime, right? This document is your mouthpiece when you're not there. For example, in this particular situation of these children, if the mom had given her 50% to her children, it would have been difficult for the father to sell that property. Why? Because the co-owners of that property would have been minor children, and therefore he would not have had ease of power to you know to sell that property. And in particular in South Africa, don't know about other countries, there's something that's very important that protects the interests of minors. If a minor is meant to benefit from an immovable property, the sale and how it's done is very stringent, because the interests of that child or those children who are minor must always be at the forefront. And so permissions will need to be given, specific permissions that come from the government that allow someone to sell such a property. So had the mom given her 50% to these children, the likelihood is that the dad would not have been able to sell so easily that property that he had, especially if it was going to leave those children destitute. So, do you see why it is important to have a will drafted? Why it is significant, the kind of change and the spin of things it could have on the consequences after your death, or on the situation rather after your death. Very critical. But then there's also something that's important to note here, is that even though a will is important, it's also very important for you to have what we call an estate plan done. You're probably asking yourself, what is an estate plan? Now, an estate plan, this is when you sit down to someone to structure your affairs. And in mind, as you're structuring your affairs and trying to come up with a plan, what you're trying to do is essentially you're planning for the situation when either you've passed away, in a situation where you cannot speak for yourself, health-related matters, you're speaking to yourself, or rather you're planning for a situation where maybe certain things will need to be accessed, but then you will not be in a healthy state to give those instructions, etc. So your estate plan is you putting a plan in place so that if anything happens to you, you become incapacitated, you pass away, you get extremely sick, there's always processes that can be followed for things to flow, right? For things to happen. So why am I saying this is important before you draft a will? Because when you are going through an estate plan, it gives you an overview of your life and your affairs. And also it gives you the opportunity to try and envision these different types of situations, and in these different types of situations you try to now put up a contingency plan. If I pass away, I've got minor kids and they're so dependent on me, so what would their life look like? Who would look after them? And how would they live? You know, all of those things, you then plan for them. Obviously, we're not expecting that when you pass away things are going to be perfect, these kids are going to be as happy as ever, etc. But it prevents all of the things, or this situation that we spoke about where this dad ended up selling a property. Also, it prevents situations of children just ending up anywhere and with anybody, right? We've seen with these girls that we were talking about here. They were there. They didn't have a stable, they would have wanted a stable life, but they did not have a stable life because they were not planned for. You know, that plan was not put in place. So when you consider this plan, it also gives you, reality. And also when you're doing this, you know what it does? It allows you to see the holes in your plans, because your will is just instructions. But now these plans allow you to see that, oh my goodness, if I were not to be there, these kids probably would be lacking there. What can I do to maybe help? Who can I talk to maybe do something here? Right? So it allows you to really get to the reality of things. And that then assists anybody that you're leaving behind. It actually protects their interests. In this instance, it would have given these children a bit of stability. It would have given these children a home to live in. There's so many things that you can consider, right? But it is important for you to plan accordingly so that things can at least happen in a way that you planned, in a way that you would have envisioned. Because otherwise, we are not going to play the guessing game trying to understand where you're coming from or what you were planning to do. Because when you don't write anything, what does happen or what happens? The law then takes over, then it regulates that situation. So that brings us to the end of our discussion today. And I hope that you learned something here, right? Doesn't matter how small it is, as long as you pick up something that you can utilize in your life, please do so. And I have one thing I want to leave you with. Never believe that things will iron themselves out when you're not there. Rather have plans in place, and if things then go sideways, you know that you would have left a hefty and detailed plan to help your own children or your family. Otherwise, when you're not there, you leave terrible situations. Never expect that the law is going to be on your side, or rather looking into your interests and trying to understand what you probably have in mind. Don't have time for that. The law has stringent terms and conditions of how these things work. So make sure that if you want to cater for certain children or people in your life, you do so as soon as possible. Don't delay this process. We never know what could happen tomorrow. Obviously, we're not planning or hoping that things will happen that way, but it's important to do this out of love. Again, my name is Yolanda Nyengeza, and this was the first episode of the Legal Detour. Prevention is better than cure. We'll see you next time.